What is up, guys? My name is Matt Workman for Cinematography Database, and today we're going to be looking at the cinematography of Ariana Grande Side to Side. So that is a music video. Go watch it if you haven't already. We're going to be looking at the camera work and mostly the lighting of the main performance with the triangle pyramid formation of the dancers on the stationary bikes. I thought that this was a really cool setup, and I got inspired to recreate it in 3D using Cinedesigner. So here's the actual Cinedesigner scene that I used to create the breakdown visuals today in Cinema 4D. The crane, the light, and a bunch of the other stuff is from Cinedesigner. On the right here is the actual view of the camera, and I was guessing something like a Red Dragon using a 25mm. And if I could show you really quickly here, this is the camera move that they were doing for this main shot. There was a couple shots, but we're going to mainly look at this main wide shot so we can look at the lighting. It was techno craning in and out just like this. And now let's go and actually break down the lighting in Photoshop. And welcome to Photoshop. So I have intentionally kept this scene a little bit simpler than the real version, and hopefully that's going to make this visually easier to understand what's happening. So we're going to go through and we're going to dissect the different layers of lighting that are happening to make this visual a reality. Okay, so starting from scratch, one of the most interesting things in this music video, in this performance specifically, is this 9x9 here floor panel that must have LEDs inside of it. I'm assuming it's kind of like a plexi square. Each one of those is like a 1 foot by 1 foot square, or slightly bigger than that actually. And then inside of that is going to be LEDs. And it's my guess that these LEDs in here are going to be 5500 Kelvin, and that the camera is going to be balanced to 3200. So these are going to be putting out blue light. And so they are themselves, of course, illuminated. You don't have to light that. That's just going to be a nice bright object. And it's going to be uplighting the talent, but in a very soft way. Whereas you would think of most situations when you uplight someone, you think that that's going to be unflattering. But when actually a light source is that big, even from below, it tends to look okay. So that's how all the talent looks so good, even though we are technically uplighting them. Because it's such a big source, it still looks really nice. And it's also kind of blue. And just so you know, I'm going to be taking you through the layers of light through the camera, and then of course I'm going to go to the behind the scenes view to show you how that was actually accomplished. But to start, we're going to be looking through the camera. So after we have this kind of floor light, this kind of carpet light going on, what happens next is a big backlight. Now, I don't know exactly what it was. I would assume it's actually a little bit bigger than what I visualized with, but it could be something like an Image 80 or something like that. Something soft, but also with a pretty broad beam, something like that. So that's going to be coming from up here, and that's going to be backlighting the whole scene. It's going to be edge lighting the talent, which is not so apparent here, but it's also going to be illuminating the floor here. So it's going to be adding a little bit of diffuse light to the floor, which was kind of like a reflective concrete that got either color corrected super blue or just, picked up the blue light from the backlight. So the backlight, I also think, was 5500 Kelvin, just like the floor light. Basically, every light in this scene, in my opinion, was probably daylight like this, except for the key light at the very end. So again, floor light, big backlight. And what happens next is we want to light up the deep, deep background and add some practical as well. So I think these look something like, I would say light matte 2L. So that's going to be like this, light matte 2L. It's kind of like a KinoFlow size LED. That's what it looked like to me. And what I think probably happened is they had one or two of them that you could actually see into camera, and they were just basically practicals and kind of some bright, interesting looks in the background. But also we have some 2Ls back here that are kind of obscured, and they're just generally lighting up the back wall and some of the columns. But in general, the idea I think was to keep the columns kind of silhouetted in the background, illuminated, that sort of thing. Just gives a lot more depth to the scene, because my guess when I went to recreate the scene is that this is actually a massive, massive warehouse or something like that. So again, hiding some LEDs in the background, also daylight to add some depth to the scene. So after adding the light mats in the background to add some depth, what I would guess these are is 4 foot and 8 foot Quasar Science LED tubes is basically what they are. And they look like they're strapped onto these kind of 4x8, I don't know, big rectangle cube things. Kind of like Black Mirrors or something like that. Very like Tron-esque. And then I went and positioned them the way that they were positioned in the video. So they're just kind of like an interesting art direction in the background. And they're going to be creating really cool reflections in the floor. And then when they're out of focus, they look really cool as well. But we're not going to be looking at that so much in this episode. And the final light that they added to this was the key light. And it's pretty subtle. This isn't like a great representation of it. But you can see here, if I go back and forth between the other one, without the key light, that's with, it's basically going to be adding some 3200 Kelvin key light onto the talent, which should be showing up white. It feels a little bit orange here, but that's because everything else is so blue. But adding just a little bit of normal front key light from above, again, likely going to be something like 3200, and that's what the camera is balanced to, so that's going to show up white. But it's very subtle and it's going to be very controlled. And of course, in the actual music video, there's going to be people here on each one of these bikes, but if I had added a person to each one of those bikes, the render times for this might have been a little bit long. Great, so let's recap through the camera. We have the floor light, basically LEDs. We add a backlight. We add some background lights, some light mats. We're gonna add our rectangle Tron lights, I don't know what to call them. And then we're gonna add our 3200 key light. And that is the lighting for the Ariana Grande side-to-side main performance setup. And now let's look at the behind the scenes of it. So starting with just the floor light, we have a techno crane here. You can't really see it because it's really dark, so I guess I should just skip to the next part. Okay, so much brighter. Again, I put a light mat 2L. It's probably something bigger or maybe a series of light mat 2L, something like that. And these are again going to be 5500 Kelvin, so they're going to be very blue. And again, this could be an image 80, it could be all sorts of things, but I would assume it's kind of a rather large or long LED source because everything else in this scene is basically LED except for the key light. That's going to be positioned right up there, right out of frame. And actually, if you watch the actual music video, because this light is so close to the top of the frame and hitting this lens down here, I know it's still hard to see the techno crane, but there's actually a bit of a lens flare and a little bit of top veil is what I usually call it, which actually looks really nice, but it kind of gives away that how big this source is and how close it is. It also could be a space balloon. It depends on how tall the ceiling is, but regardless of what it is, there is a soft blue backlight over the whole scene. It gives shape to a lot of the talent, not that you can really see it in here, and it also illuminates the floor because the floor is very bright in the final video. Okay, next here we can kind of see the Super Techno crane, and if you watch the video, I'm not going to do like a whole breakdown about the camera moves. It's definitely a techno crane. They definitely planted the base once. They're dollying in and out, even though it's on a crane, I'm calling it dollying in. They're going to go overhead, they're going to come to the side to do profiles. It's pretty straightforward techno crane coverage, which I could cover in a different video, but we're concentrating on lighting in this one. So we have the light mats now in the deep background, still kind of hard to see, but they're essentially lighting up the walls and just giving a little bit of probably one stop underexposed background ambient to the actual background so that you can see how incredibly large this space is. It gives a lot of depth, and when you're going to be doing these swinging camera moves, it gives a lot of, deeper parallax in the background. So that's why we are lighting up the background. This one here was just so that you could see the techno crane, so it probably wasn't there on set. Next, we are adding our rectangle lights, again, quasar tubes on some sort of 4x8 box that they made. Really cool reflections. This is how I think that they were laid out based on looking at the final frame and then doing it in Cinedesigner. And the final thing here is going to be our Breezy. I'm guessing it's a Breezy 140, maybe a Breezy 220. Is that the next big size? I forget. Or 180. Yeah, probably a 140 or 180, I would guess. I'll write that out for people that don't know. I didn't actually ask who shot this music video, but I kind of could guess, but I won't guess. And those DPs tend to use Breezy 140s, 180s, even bigger maybe for a scene this big. Probably with the grid in, the control grid, so that the beam isn't going like crazy wide. It's really just going to be like right on her. You don't really see it on the flanking talent as much. So again, a Breezy 3200 Kelvin, a little bit of white light added in there, very beauty angle. If you look at the chin shadow that's happening on Ariana in the actual video, it's pretty deep. And she has a really nice jaw structure and a nice a face that can take a high key angle like that and still look pretty flattering. Great, so let's walk through the steps once again. We have the LED floor light into the backlight. Again, this backlight might be a little bit bigger in reality. Then we have our background lights, our deep background lights, and somewhat practicals, the light mats. Then we're going to add the 4x8 LED tube lights or puffin things, I don't know what to call those. And then we have our Breezy, our key light at the very end. And to really wrap this up, it's kind of hard to see this, even I'm having kind of a hard time seeing this, but if you look at this, this is an overhead of the scene. So here's the camera, the crane, here is our floor piece down there, and what you'll actually see is that this is a kind of a massive space. I think I might have made this a little bit too big, but you'll see that they're shooting into a corner. Which makes sense. You typically shoot into a corner or a 3-wall if you're doing techno crane shots because you need a lot of background if you're going to be swinging the crane all over the place. So they went for a 2-wall background. Each one of these little bright spots is a light mat 2L. These are the 4x8 boxes, and I'm kind of guessing on the placement, but I think I'm close. And then these are the columns that I was guessing in this space. And so if you're using Cine Designer and you're trying to figure out something like this, we can always go to a simplified 2D overhead like this, but I prefer to work in 3D in almost all cases. Just know that this is possible. Boom. So that is going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, this is my opinion. I was reverse engineering this. I haven't seen BTS. I didn't ask the DP, even though I think I probably know who it was. This is my best guess of how this was lit, and I do think it's pretty close. If you thought it was different, if you have a different idea of how this was done, and you weren't on set because that would be cheating, let me know in the comments below. That's completely cool. If you liked the video, give a like. If you want to see more content just like this, and basically everything under the sun that I do is hopefully related to cinematography in some way, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming. I will see you guys on the next episode. You guys get out there and plan better, shoot better.